Okay, this is going to be the first video in a series about completing the square and how to solve quadratic equations that look like this using the completing the square technique. So if you look at the standard form of a quadratic, it's ax squared plus bx plus c, and all of that is equal to 0. So this is normally what most quadratic equations look like. And in my previous video I talked about solving these with factoring, and completing the square is just another method to solve these same types of equations. And completing the square works really well when it's not easy to factor your quadratic here. So say that you have something that's not easily factorable, well then you can still solve this by hand using the completing the square. So pretty much for completing the square, what you want to do is you want to move this c term over to the other side. So that's what I have written here in green. Ax squared plus bx equals negative c. So we just moved our c over to the other side. And then in these two blanks here, we're going to put b over 2 squared. So it may seem a little weird now, but we'll work this example here and hopefully it'll make sense. So we're just going to go through this one and then we'll move on to some more challenging ones also. But so we want to move our c term over to the other side of the equation. So we have x squared plus 12x, and we subtract 4 from both sides, so we end up with negative 4 on the other side there. Now we want to add in our blanks, so x squared plus 12x plus some number equals negative 4 plus some number. So pretty much what we're doing here is, since we're adding in the same number on both sides of the equation, we're not changing anything about the original equation. So just remember that when you add in your number here, just also do it on the other side. And we know from this page here that in this blank we're going to put b cut in half squared. So our b term is 12 here, so there's our b. So we're going to take 12, we're going to cut it in half, and we're going to square it. So 12 over 2 is 6, and 6 squared is 36. So we're going to just put a 36 in each blank there. So I'm going to simplify a little bit more. X squared plus 12x plus 36 equals a negative 4 plus 36 gives us a positive 32, and there's no simplification that can take place here. So the reason why we added in this 36 here was because this part of the equation is going to factor down really nicely. So if you look at this for long enough, you'll see that this is going to factor down to x plus 6 times x plus 6. And so we pretty much took this quadratic here and factored it into this. So if we were to FOIL these two together, we would end up with x squared plus 12x plus 36. And so then that means that this is now equal to 32. So now I'm going to rewrite this as x plus 6 squared. So since we have two of these, I can just rewrite it as x plus 6 squared, and that's equal to 32. And now we're kind of getting down to the end. Looking at just this equation here, just this guy here, you can see that you can now solve for x by taking the square root of both sides. The equation that we started with, if you tried to take the square root of both sides, you would end up with a x term and a square root of x term. So pretty much completing the square is a way to turn a quadratic that's not easily factored into something that can be factored, and then it's easy to solve for x from there. So to cancel out this squared, I'm gonna take the square root of this term, and what I do on this side I also must do on this side, so I'm going to take the square root there as well. So what we're left with is x plus 6 equals the square root of 32. And our last step to solve for x is just to move this 6 over to the other side. So x is going to equal to -6 plus or minus the square root of 32. So just remember that this plus or minus gets added in whenever we have a square root in our solution. So since this is a quadratic, we know that it's most likely going to have two solutions, and this plus or minus gives us our two solutions. So our first solution, we'll call x1, is going to be -6 plus the square root of 32, and then our second solution, x2, is going to be -6 minus the square root of 32. So those are both of our solutions there, and there'll be a few more examples of this in other videos.